it's not really about love oftentimes. It's about the potential that they will see or that they see in their partner. That's, I think, a problem, which leads to the pressure in the young family, where the man or the woman would want to show the world that they are making progress, that they are leading a good life, and that leads to corruption, that leads to divorce if materials don't come fast enough, and sometimes in sad cases it leads to suicide because people feel that we are not being successful. So I call that the culture of materialism. And then there is a crisis of parenting within families where you find that for the middle class families, they are not living together as a unit. The children that are born within these families are often left to the maids because the parents, the dad, the mom are busy, doing business or working. Or sometimes the children are left with the TV and the smartphone just to make sure that they don't disturb the parents when they go back home tired in the afternoon. We feel this is a challenge that the family is facing. And on that one, I want to talk about the last, emerging trend that we have observed, which is the growth of single mothers. They call it single mothers by choice. There is quite a lot of literature on this, where you hear sayings like, a girl cannot be happy forever. At one moment, she has to get married, meaning that they are considering marriage as an impediment for enjoyment of life, as an impediment for doing whatever they do. And you see this trend that there are a lot of single mothers who have chosen to be single mothers just because they want to experience this kind of freedom. And that leads to, again, the challenges of parenting. I will not talk about homosexuality because I think the last speaker has talked about it. The same too with the challenges of abortion and sexism. I want to talk about illiteracy, where in all these social problems, you find that illiteracy is at the core, where our people are not able to make informed choices, informed decisions, because they just don't have that capacity to do so. We have a problem of drug and substance abuse among our young people, where because of perhaps unemployment and lack of proper guidance, they resort to things that would make them feel happy. And so you have the abuse of drugs and substances. HIV/AIDS remain, a cross-cutting challenge. Looking at political challenges, the obvious ones, of course, are the political instabilities, in still some pockets in some countries across Africa, where you find that, there is political upheavals. You find that regarding the state and the church relationship, the relationship is only positive, is only good when the state looks at the church as providing those social, I would call them the social services, the churches, the hospitals, and things like that. In that case, there is that positive relationship. But when the church starts speaking against some ills, then the relationship collapses. The role of Catholics in politics, you find that the Catholic is now encouraging, the laity to join politics, but at the same time, when they do join politics, they are kept at a distance because the church doesn't want to be misunderstood as being, political. So some Catholics take that as a challenge. The erosion of democratic dividends, where most people have lived beyond their time of welcome, where leadership, the presidents, the people in politics do not want to leave. And here I want to provide an alternative narrative contrary perhaps to what the president yesterday said at the cathedral, that the leadership in Africa, the problem in Africa is about culture. That's where we are not making much progress. And my alternative view is that I think we have leadership deficiencies, where our political leaders are not doing as much as they ought to have done. We are in a situation where we have choiceless politics, choiceless elections, issueless politics, issueless elections, amid illiteracy. We have a challenge on monetization of politics. I have just 5 minutes. I will just run through quickly the final challenge, which is the economic challenges. And on this one, I want to talk about the issues of corruption and the consequences of corruption. Let me start by saying that, in as far as corruption is concerned, it becomes a big problem when people, the faithful, or even sometimes the church, begin to use other words around the corruption that tends to justify it. For instance, you talk about connections. What connections do you have? Instead of just saying that this is corruption. When you begin to look at corruption as connections, then your vision becomes blurred. There are economic consequences which are obvious. We undermine, service delivery because of, the leakages, the wastage of resources. You create even more and more dependency. You worsen the inequality between the rich and the poor. What is even more sad is that because of the scourge of corruption, you find that the social services, of course, suffer. You find that there is escalating unemployment, which in itself leads to crime. Political consequences are many. For instance, you undermine the official political processes, where elections, for instance, are undermined by the issue of money. You have social consequences where you begin to consider corruption as the acceptable norm, where you think that you cannot make it in society without you indulging yourself in corruption. You think about the environmental consequences, where rules are not enforced because there is always that opportunity to bypass the formal channels. I will not dwell on the teachings because I don't have time where I believe the church can take action. I have done a very small paper that I think will be circulated, where I think what I've discussed will be expanded upon. But what I would like to conclude on is that when we look at all these problems, what would become the frame of reference of the church or the frame of reference of the faithful? You find that, for people like myself, we tend to use the secular institutions, not the church institutions. When I face problems, I would resort to my rights. What does the Constitution say? What does democracy say? Instead of also reverting to the teachings of the church. The temptation is that the secular institutions are more available, they are more accessible than the church institutions. And I believe that if the church has to win back the space that it ought to have, it has to reorient itself by making these institutions more available to the people, more available to the faithful. I think I should stop there, and thank you for your attention.